Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's really a delight to be here. This is actually my first trip to Arizona. I had a little bit of time to come out and see your beautiful state, and I'm really looking forward to the field trip tomorrow. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to talk to you today about a project that we have piloted in the Great Lakes, and while it's a very different region and perhaps their drivers were a bit different than what you all are facing here in the Southwest, I think that there are a lot of transferability nuggets, and that was why I was asked to come here today. Before I get started, I just wanted to tell you just a little bit about our office. We are a national office, and we focus on working with coastal managers throughout the country. We include the Great Lakes as part of coastal management community. We also work with with Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and all of the Pacific territories. My role in that office is I really try to help make the connection between what is out there in terms of data and tools and technology and marry those up with what we're hearing from our users about their coastal issues and their coastal needs and help them find solutions that can help them address their issues. And this project is an example of that type of work that we do. So when we were getting ready to prepare for this presentation, I was asked, well, why is Noaa interested in this work? And I think I heard a lot of questions for similar, for you guys of why you're interested in looking at green infrastructure as a solution as well. And really our users are looking for data-driven solutions. They don't want to just try one thing and then try another. They want scientific information and data to make decisions. And they also want information on what things are going to cost or not cost about those decisions. Coastal management, like many other topics, is very interdisciplinary. It's very complex, and those are difficult questions to answer sometimes. So this project that I'm going to share with you today was just a little piece of the pie, a little slice about how we could begin to look at the economic aspects of green infrastructure. Our office has the mantra of thinking nationally and acting locally. So when we entered into this project, it was really critical for us that the communities that we piloted got something tangible and meaningful out of this project. We, as a national organization, also wanted to make sure that we had something that could be transferable to not only just the Great Lakes regions, but to other areas of the country, such as the Southwest. Just to get you a little bit familiar with the Great Lakes, I don't know how familiar you are all with the 5 lakes. Toledo, study area was Toledo, Ohio, which is on the coast of, this is Lake Erie. This is the shallowest of the 5 Great Lakes and has the most pollution problems. Up here in the north is Duluth, Minnesota, and it's on Lake Superior, which is the largest of the Great Lakes and the 3rd largest freshwater lake in the world. So this is where the story begins. This is a couple, and they're in their basement in Toledo, Ohio, and as you can see, it's flooded. They have water and debris floating in the basement, and if you look on the wooden posts up here, very carefully you can see that there are water stains from previous flooding events. So this isn't the first time that it's happened, and it's probably, unfortunately, not going to be the last time. They are going to have to use their own dollars to pump that water out, to replace the damage, and they're probably going to have mold issues that they have to deal with as well. And I'm guessing that it probably wasn't part of their monthly budget to take care of these issues. To give you an idea of how chronic a problem this is for Toledo, I've included this map. The city of Toledo gave this map to us when we were first starting working on this project. This is a 5-year period. Every one of those dots on this map represents a call from someone in the community complaining about standing water, whether it's in the roads or the sidewalks or their basement. Each time the city gets a call, they have to deploy someone out there to investigate the situation and then decide if there's something that the city can do to address that need. Oftentimes they're putting pumps out into the city. In the summer, they leave these pumps just stationary in different parks, and the pumps run 24/7 to try and get rid of the water that they have in their communities. Duluth is a little bit different. They are a community that has a bit of elevation, and so their flooding issues aren't as chronic or as regular as Toledo has. But what happens is they have these big storm events, and in 2012 they had the perfect storm. They had they had a very wet spring and summer, and then they had a storm where they got 10 inches of rain in 4 hours. It created this epic flood for them. They had hundreds of gallons of water careening through this watershed. The water had such a velocity that it was moving 2-ton boulders down the watershed. It was really incredible to come and look at the damage. And you can see here that the road actually just washed away. So they had a lot of infrastructure issues as well too. The zoo was flooded, and they actually had some of the animals. The water was so high that the animals were actually able to swim out over the top of their enclosures. And they had seals and polar bears swimming downtown Duluth. So it sort of just added to the interesting challenges that the community had to deal with. So both of these communities have great infrastructure in place, but clearly it's not enough to support the issues. And so they wanted some long-term, they wanted to scale up their green infrastructure, and they wanted to do some long-term planning. But they didn't know how to start that process. They had a lot of questions. What are my options? What green infrastructure should I use? How much does it cost? What are the benefits? What data do I need to even begin this sort of study? And so that's where we came in. My office received a grant from EPA's Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and we partnered with Minnesota, with Duluth and Toledo, and a variety of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Association of State Plan Managers, Eastern Research Group, American Rivers, and Old Woman Creek Near to do this project. So it was a very partner-driven, community-focused effort. And what we did was we did this sort of 5-step economic assessment. And I'm going to walk you through all of these steps of how we did the study, and then share with you what the communities have done since the study has been completed. So the first thing that we needed to do was define the flood problem, and it was pretty easy. There's water everywhere in both of these communities. But we had to figure out, we had to translate what the issue was to figure out the right scale. And we chose to do a watershed scale study. And so this map, hopefully you can see it up there, it delineates the outlines of the watersheds that we used. Neither one of these watersheds encompassed the total municipality of both of these cities. They were portions of it. They were about, to give you a scale size, they were about 4,700 acres, both watersheds were. And just to give you a little bit of a characteristic between the cities, Toledo is an area that has been heavily developed. Probably 85 to 90% of their watershed is developed with impervious pavement. Duluth is a bit different. Probably only about 60% of their watershed was developed, and this upper part of the watershed is still in a very natural state. And so they have the opportunity to make some smart decisions about what goes in or doesn't go into that watershed that may contribute to future flooding problems. Toledo is in a bit of a unique situation. The city has gone through a fairly significant economic downturn, and they have quite a bit of tax forfeited properties. Actually, they have 900 tax forfeited properties a year. And so the city has an opportunity to buy back those properties and redevelop the city. And they're trying to figure out a way to do it smartly that will address some of these issues. Okay, so we've got our location. Now we need to look at the flooding scenarios. And I think it alluded to one of the questions here, climate change. We did factor that into this project. One of the biggest climate change impacts in this region is going to be more frequent and intense rainstorms. And so it's, I think it's pretty much the flooding isn't going to get better in the Great Lakes. It's actually going to get quite a bit worse. So we built that into our study, and we looked at the current and future precipitation and land use. Future precipitation with future land use were sort of our baseline scenarios. And then looking at our flood reduction scenarios, we looked at current precipitation and current land use. We added basically we added green infrastructure into both of those first case scenarios to see if it made an impact in the flooding. Okay, so there's quite a bit of modeling work that went into this, and so rather than bore you with a bunch of graphs and charts, I'm just sort of try to simplify it and tell you what we did here with this process. So the first step was we had to figure out how much rain was going to fall now and in the future. And so we used Noaa data, rain data, for the current scenarios, and we used data from EPA's CREATE model to get our future scenarios of what they might look like. After we figured out how much rain was going to fall, then we had to figure out where the rain was going to go once it fell. So we did a lot of hydraulic modeling to determine where that would happen. And then the results from that model went into a tool called FEMA's HAZUS, which is a tool that allows you to figure out how much building damage will occur from flooding incidents. So that was the third step that we could help us identify where the flooding was occurring. Okay, so this was the first step in figuring out, this is the Toledo flood damage costs, and what we found in this particular watershed, there was approximately $740,000 worth of flood damages to buildings. So that's one of the limitations of the HAZUS tool, that it can only estimate building damages. There's clearly a lot of other damages that happen in a flooding scenario. You could have damage to your roads and bridges and so on and so forth, and we did not have that data available, so we were focusing on building infrastructure. In Duluth, we did the same thing. The building damage was a bit less than what was in Toledo. It was $400,000. And a lot of that is because, one, the watershed is not as developed as Toledo was, and two, their floodplain is quite a bit different. It's more gully-like, so the houses tend to be up a little bit more, and they're naturally protected from flooding. So that sort of resulted in a lower number of building damages. So in Toledo, then, we wanted to look at what the future scenario was, and so it increased a bit, up to almost $1 million worth of damages just in this little tiny watershed. And I should mention, too, the graphic, this tool that you're looking at, this was developed by one of our partners, the Association of State Floodplain Managers. As we were working with the city, we were giving them all these numbers about where you're going to have this volume of flooding, and it might occur here, and it was just numbers, 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 and they were kind of like, what gives? Where's the water going? So they had some very talented programmers that worked at ASFPM, and they put this tool together, and very quickly from this graphic you can see the darker, bigger the red, the more damages. And so all of a sudden light bulbs went off with city council and the community officials. We have not done that tool in Duluth yet. That's why the graphics look a little bit different. And so again, there were increased future damages for the future scenario for Duluth as well. So then step 3 was to identify what are some reduction options that we can use, flooding reduction options using green infrastructure. And there are a ton of options out there. So to figure out which one we needed, we had to figure out how much of the peak discharge of the flooding that needed to be reduced. And, we did this through, it was a very iterative process. There were a lot of options that the city could use. And what they decided was Duluth wanted to reduce their peak discharge by 10%, and Toledo wanted to reduce theirs by 10%, and Duluth wanted to reduce theirs by 20%. So once we knew how much we needed to reduce the flow, then we had to figure out the storage that we needed to reach this target. And so you can see the numbers up there for the top one is the current scenario and the bottom one is the future scenario. So when we started this project, I did not know what an acre foot was, so I had to look it up. And 1 acre foot versus storage is 300,000 gallons of water. 300,000, this is a substantial amount of storage that these folks are looking for to try and reduce this problem. And so we were all a little bit panicked when we realized how much storage we needed. So the next step was, is this even possible to find this in these watersheds? So we had to match up what our green infrastructure option was and how much their storage volume was for each one of those options. So part of the process is it even possible to get 32 acre feet worth of storage in an urban watershed? And so we sat down with the communities and we did a bit of a charrette, and they identified actually fairly quickly of, well, we could put this here and we could put that there. And so after a quick meeting, proof of concept, we kind of got the green light to continue on with the study. We checked the box in Toledo. We did the same thing in Duluth. This part of it was really great. This was where the community came in. They were really involved, and the light bulbs started turning on about where and how they could expand and incorporate green infrastructure in current projects that were going on. So the green infrastructure options that we were looking at for this particular project are the We were looking at bioswales, blue roofs, unimproved putting permeable pavement in both unimproved roads and sidewalks. In Duluth, they were very interested in underground storage. They have a number of roads that were not completed yet, and so they could put underground storage in a lot of roads that they were going to upgrade and finish. And then Toledo was definitely interested in parcel buyouts. There were a few of those in Duluth, but really a ton in Toledo. So then step 4, we then had to figure out, all right, so we know where the water's going, we know what our green infrastructure's options are, we know we can suck some of that water up. Well, how much of that water, what is going to happen with the damages? Are the damages going to be reduced? And so we went back to our scenarios and incorporated green infrastructure into the calculations. And for Toledo, you can see that using that storage capacity in green infrastructure, the costs did reduce. They went down a couple $100,000 down to about $450,000 in building damages. And then in our future scenario, again, similar trend, reducing from those damages from over $900,000 down to $500,000. We saw similar indications in Duluth from $400,000 down to just under $300,000. And again, in the future scenario, a very similar trend. So it did seem to be that this would work. And really what this slide is just telling you is that incorporating green infrastructure storage into these communities is reducing their risk at different flooding scenarios. We picked a 100-year storm, and so that storm doesn't have a very high risk of occurring very frequently, but the trends with climate change, those storms actually are becoming more frequent than 100-year floods. So the take-home message is that by incorporating these green infrastructures, they're hopefully buying down future damages that they're going to have to deal with. And we saw a similar trend in Duluth as well. So that's all fine and good. This was all a paper exercise, but where it really comes down to is the money, and can these communities afford to do this? So that was the next step, was to figure out what the cost of the green infrastructure is. And we had to compare the cost and benefits of that in this process. So for Toledo to get their 30 acre-feet of storage, using the least expensive GI options, we came up with a price tag of about $1.7 million to incorporate that into their watershed. Duluth was looking for quite a bit more storage, and their price tag was a bit heftier at $4.3 million. How we calculated our benefits was damages avoided. So if you weren't having to replace or the buildings didn't have damages, that was an added benefit. And so looking at Toledo's benefit, over a 20-year period, we estimated the benefits to be that the city would not have to spend $700,000 on flood damages. So you're not really breaking even on your investment in the 20-year window. You are, however, breaking even on a 50-year period. So, it's going to take a while to see those benefits. We saw a very similar trend in Duluth. I'm going to speak to this in a minute, but a little bit more about the data and how we think we could get to a shorter return on investment. But for both of these communities, they were delighted with this results because they went into the study thinking that they weren't going to be able to use green infrastructure at all. We were actually called repeatedly by the Army Corps before we did the study, a very strong warning that we should not do this project in Duluth because there is no way with their velocity issues that we could use green infrastructure to slow down and help reduce their flooding issues. And working through these numbers, we found that it could be possible to do that. So the communities were very excited about that. However, these numbers may be low to you, and you're kind of maybe thinking that these costs outweigh the benefits. Well, a lot of this is, as you guys know that do economics, it's driven by data. And so in order to do this assessment, you need quite a bit of data information about the buildings, roads and bridges, your stormwater infrastructure, and so on and so forth. For this particular project, we had building information for both communities. We had no information on roads or bridges of what those damages were, what those infrastructure costs were. And then in Duluth, they had a little bit more information in Toledo. So we were pretty data limited in the study. We just, with the scope and the funding and the timing, we couldn't dig in a little bit deeper. And we do think that if we'd had a little bit more data and a little bit more time, we could actually reduce that return on investment time to lower than 50 years. So I just wanted to mention real quickly about how Toledo is using the results. Part of what we did with the study is we built in a 6 to 12 month window for technical assistance so that we could help these communities use this information. We didn't want to just pop a report on their desk and say, thank you very much, have a nice day, good luck with this, but rather work with them to help them digest the information from the report and then help them figure out some future implementation steps. So in Toledo, we did a one-day workshop with the county officials and kind of walked them through the different climate change scenarios that were looking pretty likely for the Toledo area, walked them through the results of the data through our study, and then spent the afternoon brainstorming some implementation strategies that they could do. Toledo has a green infrastructure task force. All the task force members were at that workshop, and they're taking those implementation ideas, they've prioritized them, and they're working on making progress towards that end. One of the things that I think is pretty cool is Toledo is also looking at some public-private partnerships. There's a number of huge corporations that are located in the Toledo area. Smuckers and GM are two of those, and those buildings and the properties that they occupy are pretty huge. Their urban footprint is quite large, and so Toledo is reaching out to see, as part of the good neighbor, if they'll help incorporate some of the green infrastructure on their properties. And so far, those conversations have been very proactive. The Toledo's going back and reviewing their stormwater credit manual because, again, through this process, recognized that some of the recommendations aren't as green and friendly as they could be. So they're going back and updating that. And then finally, they're looking for implementation money to get funding so that they can put in some of these green infrastructure structures. They got $500,000 from the EPA using preliminary results of the study, and they're going after several other grants as well too. Duluth is a little bit different. Where Toledo, we were focused working primarily with the city. In Duluth, we worked with the Minnesota Sea Grant, and they were the conduit to bringing in all of the municipalities into the conversation. One of the things that happened in Toledo during the study was the mayor changed. So the mayor that was seated when we started this project and experienced the flood of 2012 was no longer there. So we needed to do a little bit of re-education with the city officials, and that's still actually going on in progress. And so the workshop that we ended up helping them with was a grassroots citizens-based workshop where we had different stations, and they came in and we shared the information with them, and they all made pledges about what they could do personally to help install rain barrels or rain gardens or whatever it was that they thought that they might be willing to take on. So this was a 2-year project, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot from this project, and just to give you just a few highlights of some of the things is that, really focusing on the longer term is pretty critical to these types of projects. They're not going to happen overnight, and you don't always get the results overnight. Sometimes it's very hard to get all the data that you need for these projects, but you got to do the best with what you have, and if it's available and easy to acquire a data set, go for it, but just know you're never going to have all the data to make a perfect decision. Try to think about implementing your green infrastructure over time. Leverage other infrastructure investments that you're making. So if you're going to be doing some road repairs, think about what green infrastructure options can be incorporated into that. If you have a new development that you're zoning for, think about how you can encourage that developer to put some green infrastructure options into that, those types of things. It's really also helpful to have an outside champion, somebody that is not in the elected official position or capacity. They're the folks that are going to drive and get your all of the stakeholders that are critical to the table excited and jazzed, and they bring a lot of credibility to your projects as well too. And then there's also a lot of benefits when you do these types of studies that can't be monetized. So make sure you're aware of those and keep track of them, because even if you don't have a dollar figure, they can still be very important to future funders. And then partnerships are very critical to the success of this. So what's next for Noaa? We're really working hard to share what we've learned, and this is one of the forums that we're doing this. To help make this more transferable, we've developed a process guide. So if you're interested in doing this type of project or even getting these conversations started in your community, we've developed this guide, and it takes the 6 steps that I've talked about and it drills them down into tasks and also provides case studies from what we've learned from the different communities that we've worked with. This isn't quite finished yet, but I hope it's available for download in June, and we can get that to you if you're interested. We've also developed 2 companion pieces to go along with that process guide. And so for folks that are specifically looking for green infrastructure to reduce flooding, we have this document and also a data matrix that allows you to take those. And Anna has some copies of those. I only have 25, but if you don't get one and you want one, if you give me your card with what you want, I'll make sure I send it to you or give you the link, whatever you prefer. So again, I really appreciate being here. It's a great learning opportunity for me, and would really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys more about green infrastructure. So thank you very much.